It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Dubbo Regional Council to assist to officially launch Outer Space Inner Minds as well as Dark Sky Dreamings. I was looking forward to launching this one a year ago, and it's almost like the lost year, and it's hard sometimes to work out if something happened in 2019 or 2020 or 2021 because we've all slipped into some strange time warp, but it was a year ago. I'd like to firstly acknowledge and congratulate everybody here who is published in this. It's an incredible thing to be published, and just want to acknowledge that, acknowledge your work and dedication, and those that support you in your work also.
I'll say g'day. Very quick, born in Braam, a little place out western New South Wales. Dad's a white fellow, lives with me, French, English ancestry, been here 9 generations, come on the early ships. Mum was a Kunya, Mudawari and Radri lady. Her pops from Dundallamore clan, which is just actually Dundallamore house. I grew up in Warrana, I've been in Dubbo 10 years, so I didn't really know much about my Radri connection until I got to come to Dubbo, and I feel very much at peace and welcome here. Dubbo is a very beautiful place, very welcoming to me. There's 10 clans across the region, and Radri goes, it's such a large area, it goes as far as Lithgow. A little bit out behind me, out in between Trengi, around about Trengi area, Gilgandra, which is north of us, about 60 kilometres, and all the way down to Albury, so a massive area. Within, if you think of Europe, within that area, you'd have probably like 6 or 7 countries, but within that Radri as a generic term, there's a number of clans and different subgroups, so yeah, it's just not all one harmonious general group. So for those that are not from Dubbo, please enjoy the beautiful land that we have here, and leave with minimal footprint, and hope to see you next time if you're not from this area. So thank you. I studied Mudawari when I was young, which is out near Mingonia, Gaduga, north of Bourke, and Radri is obviously here. So last 2 years I've been studying Radri, so I've got a mixture of Mudawari, Radri, a bit of French I learned, English and Aboriginal English, so I sort of incorporate that within the poem. Part of our Aboriginality is language, it has to be. Unfortunately, a lot of our knowledge in this part of the world, New South Wales, like a jigsaw. So the Aboriginal knowledge like a jigsaw, there's bits and pieces missing, and a lot of us try to fill those pieces with going back, talking to elders, linking up with our mob from the sort of the more traditional orientated communities, a lot of reading, a lot of our own research. So this is where this poem came out of. Yeah. So it's called Braam, which is, there's a little note down the bottom which is, should have worn my glasses, Radri for sky. And my nephew's name's Kian. He was born on the full moon. So I named my nephew Kian, he's about 25. So in our mum's language, other language, Mudawari, it's moon. So Kian moon. So never been to a book reading before, it's the first time. I noticed, I've seen a lot of movies, people get really serious and they're smoking cigarettes in clubs and reading poems. Really deep, really meaningful.
Black beret.
I'm just a superficial male, so I try to come across as someone with meaningful and... Okay, so don't forget to say you're the next line. Okay, so Braam. My ancestors gaze upon
this night, Braam.
Gazing upon the magnificence of this night, Braam. Neck arched, eyes searching, mind and emotions unable to process all that is laid before me. This is a part of my essence, my soul, my connection to country, all of its natural elements, a tapestry of constant flux of lights and travelling objects. The Kian, bright, constant in its scrutiny. In my sadness, I have looked upon its splendour. In my mother's sadness, she has looked upon its splendour. In my father's sadness, he has looked upon its splendour. In my happiness, I've looked upon its splendour. In my mother's happiness, she has looked upon its splendour. In my father's happiness, he has also looked upon its splendour. I am linked through culture, genetics, suffering, dispossession, resilience, sadness. My ancestors, those who came, those who are here, they have used the Braam for guidance, ancestors, answers. Sorry, I've left my glasses in the car. Romance, reflection. My actions are their actions. What I see, they seen. The night Barung was here and will be there when my ashes across the land. It's been a long time since I read it. Yeah, thank you. I had to reread it.
Thank you for all being here today, and it's fabulous to hear everybody's voice. I'd just like to say that stories connect people, places and time, and what I have found being part of this process is that a lot of people relate to my story, and that's Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, young and old, because they are living in remote country towns as well. It was interesting, I had a gentleman from Narrandera knock on my door, non-Aboriginal man, and he wanted to meet me after reading the story, and he wanted to sit under the tree at home and just talk about what was in the story, because he could see himself in the story as well. And I have children at school now asking me to read my story, and they, every time I see them, when are you going to come back and read us another story? Because they are in those places that I was in. Alright, Riverbank dreaming. Lately I've been remembering my childhood and youth. These memories are a part of who I am, but they bring with them bucketfuls of emotions that linger and need to be shared. Whenever my family and I share our stories, we're transported back to a feeling we call home. It's very strong. Home is the Muri, the informal settlement a few kilometres out of Condobolin, where so many of my older relatives lived. Home is Riverbank Street, one of the first streets in town we were allowed to live in. Home is sitting on the riverbank, or floating in the cool water, or laying on the trampoline on a clear night with my brothers and sisters, gazing at the glorious stars and moon. Or more recently, spotting shooting stars and exploring the Milky Way with my children. Home is sharing old memories and making new ones with those we love and care about, to keep our stories alive. I was born in 1969, so I have decades worth of my own memories to share. I spent my first 21 years in the same house, which is almost unheard of in my community these days. We lived in Goobang Street, where times could be tough, but love was big. Mum and Dad raised 11 children in a 3-bedroom home that Dad built himself. The house still stands today. My dear mother, a housewife who cared not only for her own family, but for the neighbours' children and anyone else who needed help. She had the biggest heart and was the strongest person I've ever known. She had to be. Many times she was unsure whether she had enough money to feed us all. The family got by with what we had, and the good old barter system, which is still alive in country communities today. A bag of apples swapped for a basket of eggs, or a meal in exchange for a job well done. We didn't have much, but we shared what we had with our large extended family, friends, and others in our community. That was just the way it was done back then, the way it has always been done. We were taught to work hard, play hard, be respectful, listen to our elders, and most importantly, to see the funny side of any situation, even in circumstances when we felt like we were running for our lives. And our heart was beating out of our chest because we were so scared. We always had to be home before dark, and you certainly didn't whistle after the sun went down. Whistling was like signalling the spirits to find you. We still practice these beliefs today and find ourselves saying exactly the same things to our children that our parents said to us. Sometimes we stay out too late and had to walk down the back lane under a pitch black sky. The trees closing in on us, no moon and hardly a single star. And that old abandoned house, it was so scary. I was the youngest child, and my brothers and sisters often teased or tricked me. When we entered the laneway, they'd yell, "Run!" then disappear and leave me alone in the dark. I'd freeze with fright. I'd stand there crying and singing, "Jesus loves me." To stop myself being so afraid. Eventually they'd come back for me and laugh and ask how singing a song would save me. Riverbank Street was good to us though. Our houses were very tidy and well kept, with fruit trees and veggie patches in the yards. We took great pride in our homes, both inside and out. But it was more than pride. There was fear too. Our elders and parents always had in the back of their minds that someone would report us to the authorities. We feared that even if our houses were spotless, but the washing up wasn't done, after a meal, we'd be called dirty blacks. The stereotype our people had endured for generations. It explains why so many of us are still apologetic if anything is out of place when visitors come.
I discovered what trees do when we all sleep at night. I caught them out. They act in plays and they dance. And they do it for the stars. And that's what this poem is all about. And the poem is called Tree Dance. Racing out of a quiet black night on a desolate country road, away from the darkness and away from the cold, I saw at every swerve and turn, suddenly appearing in the beam of the light, majestic trees, pressing against the edge of the road, with their big arms raised in theatrical poses, as they acted and danced out secret and ancient tales that whispers from this wide and open heart of central New South Wales. The stars, a packed audience viewing from the galleries above, excitedly spurred them on, with silent chants that would repeatedly build up to a mighty celestial roar. Until in the east, adhering to a kookaburra's call, the sun started brewing a deep pot of molten copper, boiling and spattering over the distant brim across the soft blue flesh of a newborn sky. I continued driving into the morning, still swerving and cutting through the plains, but the trees now stood next to the roadside, staring, far removed from a glamorous night and stripped from their costumes by daylight, with a hot wind pulling on their dust-rebound rags as they were wearing, as they attended to their tedious tree labour throughout the scorching day. Until, in the east, the first stars took their seats, eagerly calling out for another performance on this old and rugged crust of sacred planet Earth, to celebrate the dawn of life and all things breathing, and whispers that echo on through time at the times when they are dreaming. Thank you.
So anyway, I'm going to read you a short extract from March until I found something that really did resonate with me. March. Morning walk was cool with the promise of a fine day. Cirrus clouds were appearing by 8 a.m. White puffs breaking up in all shapes and sizes, with some grey undertones in large masses. I can see more clouds moving quickly in a race to join these masses. I feel ecstatic. This is a new week. What will it bring? The sun shows briefly and the clouds are massing in the east. Looks stormy. Radio warns of severe thunderstorms, hail, flash flooding in the northern areas of the state, but it remains dry here. We've experienced temperature changes from cold to hot to moderate and back again, but with sunny skies. Slight breeze and faintest of clouds from the south. White cirrus clouds with blue-white dry sky. I call these white hot days, days that have to be endured. There's no good complaining.
And while we were talking about what we would write for Big Skies, I was in the middle of writing this book, which is a young adult fantasy fiction. And the girl on the front, her name's Shannon, she's 15. And what developed out of this is a bit of backstory It's a myth from her world, well, the world she ends up in. So she's from our world, but she ends up in way in the future in a world called New Earth, or Narth, which you can imagine is actually a colony way down there. And I think part of being in the environment that we were in when we were talking about writing these stories, where we were looking at Indigenous mythology, it kind of got in there a bit. This myth is to do with the sky. It's a story from the sky. And so there we go. The searing emptiness of loss stabs into my guts. This is not my world. The meagre stars beading the midnight sky above Narth, New Earth, they are not my stars. My stars on the western plains of New South Wales charge across the sky from horizon to horizon. Out of habit, I raise a hand to these alien stars, ready to thread my fingers through their brightness. Out there, somewhere, sometime is my home, Earth. But it's a paradox, time and space running forward and out. I drop my hand to my chest and spread my fingers, pressing down hard, but nothing stops the pain of permanent separation from my parents, my friends, my world. Instead, the wound grows and I imagine myself leaking out, soaking into the foreign soil. My heart jolts and the breath in my chest shudders, a little death. My hands reach out beyond the scrag, scrabbling for round lumps of rock. Surely here, in this place of bare rocks and boulders, there must be healthy, healing heart stones. And the prime. How had I forgotten the prime, the voice of sentient Narth? Healthy, healing heartstones. A trail of wellness soaks out of them, filling the broken spaces. Welcome. My fingers clutch the heartstones, frantic not to lose this connection with Prime's voice. I lift one to my face. The night is so dark now, it's invisible, but as I roll one over my soft cheek, the tension dissolves. My shoulders relax. I tuck the stones into my belt pouch. I think for the first time since Rad left, I just might be able to shrug off this hollow weariness and sleep through the night. Rad, the Haoim runt of a race so damaged, their bodies flickered in and out of this dimension. Rad and me, an unlikely pairing, sharing our minds, our hearts, our souls, or at least we used to. I'm about to roll over onto my side when Bryn drops his swag, stretches it out and settles down so we're head to head. As a boy, I would come here, out into this wilderness, to be one with the prime and the stars. I point to the constellation directly above us, 6 stars, 3, 4, 5, 6, in an almost perfect circle. Tell me about that one. There's a long silence, and I wonder if I've offended. Crossed a cultural boundary Bryn's race, hold dear. He surprises me by shifting so close our heads bump, and the beads in our plaited hair touch and gently clink. I stay as still as I can, savouring this rare intimacy. We are not a prosaic people, Shannon. We don't tell stories around the fire as your people do. Your people. No, they would never be my people again. But you do have some sort of story. We call it the Ring of Arrival. The ships that came with your people thousands of years ago came through the ring. Your Haoim Rad, has he shared this history with you? I roll over, hoist myself up on my elbows and meet his eyes, glowing like honey in the dark. This is so hard. Rad had gone on a quest. Where once we were mind-melded, now there is the slimmest thread connecting us, and she has made me promise to leave her be. So I have to search my mind, go back to the moment when her dying mother breathed her race's memories into me, memories I would pass on to her children, onto Rad.
And another poem I want to read today. It's also feministic, you would say, also about some girl who was a princess, but it's the legend how the main constellation of the northern stellar hemisphere appears. There is this Greek myth. And knowing a bit of Greek actually helps in life when you see words like philology. It's just two roots: phil, love, log, word, and many others. So you look around and you find that all many things around us are based in Greek civilization. It helps to understand these cultural roots. So, a girl from Arcadia. Before they moved to the celestial sphere, events took place on the Arcadian mountain monarchic. One can clearly see the end of the story and possibly the beginning, though what occurred between the boundary points is unclear. In the beginning, she was a girl, pretty for sure, not the ideal perfection of the sovereigns of the land. Only they were ideal, but close enough to attract their attention. They checked the curve of her faces, diagonals of eyebrows, tangent of everything hair, found her approaching perfection as close as possible to imagine for mortals. In this case, her fate was determined. She was considered a duplicate of the female sovereign, was taken to the temple. Her wild relatives thought she would be a concubine. The savages took it wrong. Indeed, with the female sovereign, the girl doubled arcs and circumference of their exquisite bodies in the quadrature of the bed. She learned the goddess proportions, the division in extreme and mean ratio, though neither of them was mean or extreme. She was a good learner. So she was to meet the male sovereign in some wild place beyond the temple, in a cave or in a forest. The girl's ideal mistress reflects on her alliance with the master, their intersection fraught with multiplication of essences, pushing the girl away from the harmony of perfection to the chaos of recognizable white, a chaotic anima, a bear. Maybe it was the sovereign who pushed her away. Maybe she could not stand closeness to the ideal, but she was afraid indeed. Her lines trembles and mingles into chaos, lost in fog and pandemonium of branches, actually turning into a bear. This needed correction. By sharp second lines to stop the ugliness, ideal substances were called for dividing chaotic creature into primary elements. The girl was destroyed. From now on, neither order nor chaos, neither girl nor bear, nothingness on the earth, ideal substance freed from bodily hazel. Though it was said, unreliably by her wild fellow tribesmen, the sovereign of the land duplicated her image in a brilliant drawing and nailed it to the stellar dome to remember for himself and for everyone on the earth. See in the sky. Some call it Arctos, some Ursa Major. In highland Arcadia, some still call her pretty Callista, daughter of Lycaon.
It had been a harsh end to the fishing season, the worst that even old Reuben could remember, and he was 85, although that was by his own reckoning. Day after day, for weeks on end, the seas had leapt and clawed at the harbour walls, smashed against the rocks, sent white clouds of spume soaring up the cliff faces. The rains had swollen the rivers and streams, and these rivers and streams had escaped their banks to run through the village streets. Gales had sent slates flying from the church roof and crashing into the market square. Sleet had swept off the great grey Atlantic and across the moors. The fishing boats, sturdy two-masted luggers, strained against their ropes and anchors, some of them crashing into the sea wall, others breaking their tethers completely, and drifting wildly like violent drunkards thrashing out at their drinking companions. A mile or two along the shore, a schooner, in ballast from Penzance, had foundered in a gale. 8 bodies had been washed up on the sands. In the dawn light, the fishermen gathered on the quayside, hunched in their oilskins, and looked despairingly out across a sea framed by dark clouds. Although their families were hungry and they themselves felt the gnawing shame of impotence, they knew that only empty nets and a plunging death waited for them out on the water. So they returned to their cold cottages and cleaned their already clean gear and inspected their already well-mended nets and waited for the weather to break. Manos Leontakis bounded up the boulder-strewn hillside, using the peculiar loose-limbed gait he'd learnt as a boy from his father, and which, much to his surprise, his muscles had remembered. Despite the years in Athens, sitting at a desk or looking through the eyepiece of a telescope, he was still a Cretan, a descendant of heroes, even of those who had no more substance than a shadow on a cave wall. With German troops in sight of the Acropolis, he'd returned to Crete to see his parents, both now old and frail, intending to return to the mainland to do whatever he could to help. But then he'd see the Fallschirm Jägers tumbling earthwards, parachutes blooming in the clear May skies, and knew he'd have to stay to defend his home, his island. The going became easier, and he could look up at the vault of the sky, at the familiar pin-pricked black cloth through which the stars shone. He knew their distances from Earth, their intrinsic brightness, their periods, which of them were giants and which were other galaxies, and he recognised the constellation, those finger-posts by which astronomers found their way around the night sky, and around which the ancients had woven stories of gods and heroes.
So this is based on a fictional school excursion which has true elements to it. So I'm just going to start after the school bus has reached the summit of the observatory hill, and you may remember a couple of years ago the ABC did a show with BBC, Professor Brian Cox and Julie Zamiro, Stargazing Live. So this is based on at that particular time. So the school bus has arrived. Now students, you must be on your best behaviour, announced Mrs X. She's Mrs X to protect the guilty. You are representing your students, your school, and are lucky to be the first class invited here. She sighed before adding under her breath, let's hope you're not the last. As the 8-year-olds tumbled off the bus, Harry Hartley pushed to the front. A woman was waiting for them. Hello children, she said, I'm Mrs ABC. Hello Mrs ABC, they chorused. I know all the planets in order from the sun, said Harry. Mercury, Venus, Earth. That's very impressive, but we must be off, said Mrs ABC. Yes, and I'm going to be an astronomer when I grow up and find aliens. Do you think there are aliens? No. Now, follow me up this path to where they're filming Stargazing Live. You can watch from the gallery and later I'll take you out to look at the stars. The group puffed and panted their way up 8 flights of stairs to level 4, where they huddled along the glass panel. There's Professor Brian Cox, said Harry Hartley, pointing. I've seen him on TV. My father says he used to be a rock star. I know all the planets in order. Thank you, Harry, said Mrs X. There's Julia Zamiro. Look, she's waving. My father says she's hot. Thank you, Harry, snapped Mrs X. Below them, filming began. Welcome to another series of Stargazing Live, brought to you from Siding Spring Observatory near Coonabarabran in New South Wales. I'm Brian Cox. And I'm Julia Zamiro. Over the next 3 nights we'll celebrate the southern night sky. Harry turned away and glanced at photographs on the gallery wall before facing the film set. Julia Zamiro was looking across at her co-host, who added, Yes, and once again we have our Citizen Science Challenge. Who knows what they will find? I know all that, Harry began. Shh, hissed Mrs. X through gritted teeth. The class watched as filming continued with live crosses to other parts of the country. This is boring. I know. Shh. Mrs. ABC beckoned the children to follow as she led them outside. I'm going to take you over to Space Gandalf, otherwise known as Greg Quick, and Kumi Taguchi. You can look through the telescopes. I'm cold, said Harry. Yes, we're all cold, said Mrs. X as they arrived at the viewing point. Now, children, this is Space Gandalf and Kumi. Mrs. ABC held out her hand. Hello, Space Gandalf. Hello, Kumi, the class replied in unison. A man with long grey hair and beard led them over to the largest telescope. Why are you here? Asked Harry. This is a dumb place. The trig point is higher. We're here because last time it was so windy up there my beard was blowing sideways. That's why. I know all the planets. Shush! Don't interrupt Space Gandalf. Mrs. X stifled an urge to cause bodily harm. I wasn't really interrupting. I was just telling him, shush. Now, kids, I'll get you to look through the bigger telescope. Up in the northwestern sky, you might see a bright red giant star called Arcturus. It's bigger than our sun and cooler too, but it gives off about 100 times as much light. Something moved in the bushes. What's that noise? Asked Harry. Probably a kangaroo. Now, up there, the man continued, the bright stars of Centaurus. Harry moved to the back of the group. Again, the bushes rustled. Mrs. X, there's something. Shh! Listen to Space Gandalf. Harry peered into the darkness and slowly his eyes began to focus. A strange little man about 1 metre tall looked directly at him. Who are you? Harry asked. Are you an alien? The little man put an overlong finger to his lips before taking off into the bush. I just saw an alien. Harry pushed to the front of the group. Don't be silly, said Mrs. X. It was probably a kangaroo, said Kumi. Eek, aliens, screamed a classmate. Space Gandalf sighed. Look, kids, I really don't think there are any aliens here. We're looking for them in outer space. But I saw one, a little man, this high. Harry held out his arm to indicate height. Finding himself the centre of attention, he added, I think he was green. Green? Don't be ridiculous, said Mrs. X. It's too dark to see anyway. I saw a little green man, I did. That's unlikely, said Space Gandalf. Now, in the night sky up there, I saw a little green man. Stop interrupting, said Mrs. X, and don't be ridiculous, there's no such thing. Mrs. X turned back to listen to Space Gandalf. I saw a little green man, Harry grumbled to himself. Just because no one else saw him doesn't mean he wasn't there. Meanwhile, just outside the small cone of light provided by the TV crew, a little green man sent a message back to his home planet. No intelligent life here.